Hello friends, this is Chris. So today we are going to see some philosophical mind martial arts master. That is the Bruce Lee's Lost interview. I think it's an interview of Bruce Lee's, maybe the first film or second film, I think. And that time the film was super duper hit. Hollywood is experiencing a new style of fighting, the Chinese way of fighting or the Asiatic ways of fighting, something like that. Hollywood is experiencing, and Bruce Lee was the first human who brought this type of martial arts in front of the whole world. So that interview we are going to see full versions. Okay, not a some scene versions. That is a full versions. How Bruce Lee used to talk, what was Bruce Lee's voice, and what his thought about the future ways of martial arts. So let's have a look about the Bruce Lee's philosophical thoughts and I think his prophecies.
Bruce Lee faces a real dilemma. He's on the verge of stardom in the United States with a projected TV series on the horizon, but he's just achieved superstardom as a film actor here in Hong Kong. So what does he choose, the East or the West? It's the kind of problem most budding movie actors would welcome.
It's the Pierre Burton Show,
Pierre Burton
the program that comes to you from the major capitals of the world. This edition comes to you from Hong Kong. And Pierre's guest is the man who taught karate, judo, and Chinese boxing to James Garner, Steve McQueen, Lee Marvin, and James Coburn. The newest Mandarin superstar, known in the West for his appearances in Batman, The Green Hornet, Ironside.
That time Bruce Lee was done some of the series called Batman, Green Hornet, Ironside. I have not heard this type of name, but right now I'm knowing that Ironside also he has played some sort of characteristics in that series, maybe series or film.
Longstreet. His name is Bruce Lee,
Bruce Lee.
and he doesn't even speak Mandarin. And here's Pierre.
Well, how can you play in Mandarin movies if you don't even speak Mandarin? How do you do that?
Well, first of all, I speak only Cantonese.
Yeah.
So
Cantonese, I think maybe some sort of Chinese language, maybe Hong Kong language, maybe.
I mean, there is quite a difference as far as pronunciation and things like that go.
So somebody
Can you really see that Bruce Lee's voice was very deep? Well, I can like this type of voice Bruce Lee is having. So depth voice.
else's voice is used, right? For you.
Definitely, definitely.
You just make the words. Doesn't that sound strange when you go to the movies, especially in Hong Kong, in your own town, and you see yourself with somebody else's voice?
Well, not really, you see, because most of the Mandarin picture done here are dubbed anyway.
They're dubbed anyway.
Anyway, I mean, this week.
Because that time, dubbed all those things, make it in the English version.
God, I mean, they shoot without sound. So it doesn't, make any
Your
difference.
lips never quite make the right words, do they?
Yeah, well, that's where the difficulty lies, you see. I mean, in order to, because the Cantonese have a different way of saying things, different from the Mandarin.
Yeah.
So I have to find like something similar to that and keep a kind of a feeling going behind that. Something that matching the Mandarin deal.
Like the
Does
old
it
silent
sound complicated?
days. Like the old silent days. But I gather in the movies made here, the dialogue is pretty stilted anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, see, to me, a motion picture is motion. I mean,
You can see the philosophical, his way of telling is like he is in front of a camera, acting. Normal language he is only speaking, but very much philosophical. For me, see the words. For me, a motion picture is in motion, and look about his eyes. Many of the film, I think, Enter of the Dragon. If you look, the camera was very much showed about his eyes, the looking of his eyes, the deepness of his eyes. You see, here is also the same angle he is portraying in front of these reality shows, in front of these interviews. So maybe I think that it's very much, his real life and very much matching to his film career. Okay, the fighting also be the very best version in real fight also. He made a very best version.
I mean, you gotta keep the dialogue down. to the minimum.
Did you go to?
So can you see the dialogue down? Motion pictures for me is motion, so dialogue will be down, but everything will be motion. So what a thought about Bruce Lee. Great, nice thought.
Did you look at many Mandarin movies before you started playing in the
Yes,
first
yes,
one?
yes.
What did you think of them when you saw them?
Quality-wise, I mean, I have to admit
Yeah.
that it's not quite up to the standard. However, it is growing and it is getting higher and going toward that standard, than what I would term quality.
They say the secret of your success in that movie, The Big Boss, which
Yeah.
was such a success, you're in rocketed
Big Boss, yes. At that time, Big Boss came.
you to stardom in
Rocket
Asia,
started in
was
Asia.
that you did your own fighting. As an expert in the various martial arts in
Mhm.
China, what did you think of the fighting that you saw in the movies that you studied before you became a star?
Well,
See, what a position. I mean, what a pose. Like this, he's thinking and giving an intellectual answer. You know, what a character.
I mean, definitely in the beginning, I had no intention or whatsoever that what I was practicing and what I'm still practicing now would lead to this
Yeah, I know.
to begin with. But
So he didn't even thought that what he was practicing and what he was showing, what were his friends or any other persons. He didn't thought that he will come to a Hollywood star, will become a Hollywood star, or rather he will make a film about his own film. So he never thought
martial art has a very, very deep meaning
deep meaning.
as far as my life is concerned, because as an actor, as a martial artist, as a human being, all these I have learned from martial art.
Maybe for our audience who doesn't know what
The way of acting, all this I have learned. What a sign.
it means, you might explain exactly
Alright.
what you mean by
Right.
martial art.
Right. Martial art include all the combative arts like karate or
Judo.
karate, judo, Chinese kung fu or Chinese boxing, whatever you call it. All those. You see, like Aikido, Korean, I can go on and on and on. But it's a combative form of fighting. I mean, it's not, some of them became sport, but some of them are still not. I mean, they use, for instance, kicking to the groin, jabbing fingers at the eyes, and things like that.
See the definitions. Martial arts is martial arts. What a variation of martial arts he is telling, and I think that Bruce Lee has known all these types of forms of martial arts: judo, karate, kung fu, Chinese karate, whatever he told. Everything he has practiced, he has learned everything, every field, so that maybe it can be used in future movies also. But Bruce Lee died in a very an early age. In his prime time, Bruce Lee died. So what to do? We have not seen many of the movies of Bruce Lee, but whatever movies he has done, it is very much fascinating.
No wonder you're successful in it. Chinese movies are full of this kind of action anyway. They needed a guy like you could.
Violence, man.
So you didn't have,
Violence, yes, Chinese movies of violence. So Bruce Lee can understand everything is violence.
you was a double when you moved into the motion picture world here. You did it all yourself. Can you break 5 or 6 pieces of wood with your hand or your foot?
I'll probably break my hand and foot.
So the anchor is telling, can you break the fire or hair or woods with your hand? He's telling he will break his hand with his foot. So you can imagine that his foot is much more stronger than the hand, but I don't think both his hand and foot are very much stronger, equally stronger. You cannot judge his hand or feet.
But tell me a little bit. You set up a school in Hollywood, didn't you, for people like
Yes.
James Garner and Steve McQueen and the others?
Yes.
Why would they want to learn Chinese martial art? Because of a movie role?
Not really. Most of them, you see, to me, at least the way that when I teach it, all type of knowledge ultimately means self-knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they're coming in and ask me to teach them not so much of how to defend themselves or how to do somebody in, rather They want to learn to express themselves through some movement, be it anger, be it determination, or whatsoever. So in other words, what I'm saying therefore is that he is paying me to show him in combative form the art of expressing the human body.
Which is acting in a sense, isn't it?
Well,
Or it would be useful tool for an actor to have.
it's, I mean, it might sound too philosophical, but it's unacting acting or acting unacting. If you,
What to say? In a confused words, acting, acting, or acting, unacting. Confused words. He's thinking and telling all those things. So for a normal human like us, it would be, above the mind. It doesn't go inside our mind, it's above the mind, because his thought is something different about the martial arts. And we also get to know that those time, Chinese martial arts was not going to be, they don't teach outside Chinese people. You cannot outsource the Chinese martial arts to any other countries, but rather you have to be kept in private inside the circle of Chinese people. Right? It's like China is always the same. China is having lots of privacies. You cannot get any information about China. Still today also, if you look at the China, you cannot get any information about China. Now, China can get any information about you or any other countries, but you cannot get the information about China. So that time it was there. At that time, this type of culture was there, tradition was there, that only martial arts will be learned by the Chinese people, not any other people. But Bruce Lee and Ip Man, if you see the movies, Bruce Lee didn't follow the rules of regulations of China's. Bruce Lee used to live in Hong Kong, and he didn't follow this type of traditions. He used to teach the people, whoever it is, what religion, what culture, what nationalist they are. He used to teach the people.
You've lost me.
I have, bro.
Yes, lost me, yes. If you say this type of words, acting, unacting, people will get lost in words.
Different from our kind of boxing.
Well, first we use the feet,
That's
and then we use the elbow, and
use the thumb too.
you name it, man. We
Use it all.
You have to, you see, because that is the expression of the human body. Everything. Not just the hand. And
So for Bruce Lee, martial arts is just expressing the human body. Can you look this type of finger? There is a very much resemblance of this finger in many of his movies. See, in this interview only, he is doing this type of finger, acting of finger, and many of his, I know many of, if you have seen Bruce Lee's movies, you have seen this finger. So matching, very much matching. His life is matching to film only.
you're talking about combat. Well, if it is a sport, now you're talking about something else. You have regulations, you have rules. But when you're talking about fighting as it is, with no rules,
real fighting.
Well, then, baby, you better train every part of your body. And when you do punch, now I'm leaning forward a little bit, hoping not to hurt any camera angle. You gotta put the whole hip into it and snap it and get all your energy in there.
See the movement of Bruce Lee's, as if means if you talk about martial arts, if you show something demo, then you can get the energy. Actually, he is telling that you need to learn every form of martial arts, whether it is karate, judo, because if you get into an actual fight, at that time, no kung fu will help you, no karate will help you. But if you learn everything, then you can get the fight. You can be the winner of that fight. So I think maybe this type of sentence he wants to tell, these points he wants to tell, that learn everything. If you are in the field of fighting, learn everything, because in real fight it can be anything. Not just depends on the one type of fight. Learn the fight of every style. This he wants to convey the message. Great thing.
And make this into a weapon.
I don't want to tangle you in any dark that right now. You came at me pretty fast there. What is the difference between Chinese boxing, and what we see these young men doing at 8 o'clock every morning on the rooftops in the parks called shadow boxing, which they're always.
Well, actually, you see, that is part of Chinese boxing.
Yes.
There are so many schools. different
Everybody here
schools.
seems to be, going like this all the time.
Well, that's good. I'm
They're all good
very
shows.
glad. I'm very glad to see that, because at least somebody is caring for their own body, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good sign.
That's a good
Well,
sign. So somebody's caring, health conscious, that somebody's caring to get up in the 8 o'clock and doing something exercise or something martial arts type. So Bruce Lee like this type of pattern.
It's a kind of a slow form of exercise, which is called Tai Chi Chuan. I'm speaking Mandarin just now.
Yeah.
In Cantonese, Tai Chi Chuan. Okay?
Okay.
And it's
I didn't
more
get the
of an
name, but-
exercise for the elderly, not so much for the
Give me a
young.
demonstration. Show me. Can you do it, a little bit of it? Just.
I mean, the hand-wise is very slow.
What was it?
And you push it out, but all the time you are keeping the continuity going. Bending, stretching, everything. Suppose, you just keep it moving.
It's like a ballet dancer there.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to them, you see, the idea is running water never grows stale. So you gotta just keep on flowing.
You can see the words running water never goes stale. So what a thought, means every pose he has some thought behind it, and you can see that philosophical words he is telling.
Of all your students, famous, James Garner, Steve McQueen, Lee Marvin, James Coburn, Roman Polanski, which was the
James Garner, Roman Polanski, all of his students.
best,
Which was the
who
best?
adapted best to this Oriental form of
Okay.
exercise and defense.
So which was the best among your pupils? Asking by the anchor to the Bruce Lee.
Well, depending, okay? Now,
Okay,
as a
depending.
fighter, Steve McQueen, now, he is good in that department because that son of a gun got the toughness in him. I
See it on the screen.
he would say, all right,
See the style of a fighting, son of a. See the style of saying. You can see the expression of his face. And if you say the word fight, that fight expression you can see.
baby, here I am, man. and he'll do it.
Yeah,
And he will do
Now, James Coburn is a peace-loving man,
it. Okay.
I met him.
He is loving man.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've met him. I mean, he's really, really nice. I mean,
Yeah.
super mellow and all that. I
He
mean,
is.
now he appreciates the philosophical part of it. Therefore, his understanding of it is deeper than Steve. So it's really hard to say. You see what I'm saying
Yeah.
now?
I see.
I mean, it's different. So that's, depending on what you see in it.
Interesting that we don't, in our world, and haven't since the days of the Greeks who did, combine philosophy and art with sport. But quite clearly,
If you say this type of words in front of a normal person, then it's out of the mind. Because what Bruce Lee is thinking and what we are understanding, our perceptions becomes very much limited rather than Bruce Lee's perceptions. So, what to say? Nothing to say about. Cannot say anything.
Oriental attitude is that the three are facets of the same things.
Man, listen, you see, really, to me, ultimately, martial art means honestly expressing yourself. Now, it is very difficult to do. I mean, it is easy for me to put on a show and be cocky
Yeah.
and be flooded with a cocky feeling and then feel like pretty cool and all that. Or I can make all kinds of phony things, you see what I mean? Blinded by it. Or I can show you some really fancy movement. But to express oneself honestly, not lying to oneself, and to express myself honestly, that, my friend, is very hard
Very
to do.
hard.
And you have to train. You have to keep your reflexes so that when you want it, it's there. When you want to move, you're moving. And when you move, you are determined to move. Not taking 1 inch, not anything less than that. If I want to punch, I'm going to do it, man, and I'm going to do it. you see.
So I think maybe Bruce Lee is telling that don't hesitate in life. Don't hesitate. If you take something to do, then do it. Don't hesitate. If you want to hurt, then hurt it, don't hesitate. If you want to give a punch, then punch it, don't hesitate. So, Bruce Lee used to show some demos to the people. So Bruce Lee used to think that, yes, I can show the demo. In the real world, spectator will be speechless about my movement of martial arts. But according to Bruce Lee, he just wanted to express himself. So that is very much hard to express oneself in terms of martial arts. And don't hesitate in martial arts. Okay, if you want to defeat your enemy, whatever the movement may be, don't hesitate, just do it. That is, I think, maybe his point of view.
So that is the type of thing you have to train yourself into it, to become one with the, you think?
Yeah, this is very un-Western, this attitude. I want to ask you about your movie and TV career, but first we'll take a break, and I'll be back with Bruce Lee.
I have never heard this type of, Bruce Lee's. I have seen some of the, famous word statements. Bruce Lee's interview I've seen, but this type of full version interview I have never seen. Yes, some scene I have seen of Bruce Lee's interview, but not this type of. And you can get to know that Bruce Lee's real version, depth version. Okay, everything we imagine in Bruce Lee in terms of films, but what was the Bruce Lee's real life? Only you can predict through these videos about his words, about his depthness, and many resemblance of characteristic is there in films also and in the real life also. The looking of eye, that is great. The looking of eye is great, and his thought about the martial arts is also great.
Bruce Lee, mainly about the Chinese martial arts, which include things like Chinese boxing, karate, and judo, which is what he taught when he was in Hollywood. After he left the University of Washington, where he studied of all things philosophy, if you can believe that. He did, but that perhaps you understand why the two go together from the first half.
Okay, so Bruce Lee also studied philosophy. Okay, I don't know that, but I thought that yes, he loves philosophy. He used to speak many philosophical words, but I didn't thought that he loved philosophy, and he also studied philosophy. That I didn't know, but here, this anchor is telling.
For this program, and you can perhaps understand how he got into films. He knew a lot of actors, but I'm told the big break when you played in Longstreet. I must tell the audience that
That's it.
Bruce Lee had a bit part or a supporting role in the Longstreet series, and this had an enormous effect on the audience. What was
Longstreet series?
Well, you see, the title of that particular episode of Longstreet is called The Way of the Intercepting Fist. Now,
Longstreet series.
I think the successful ingredient in it was because I was being Bruce Lee.
Yourself.
Myself, right. And did that part, just express myself, like I say, honestly express myself at that time. And because of that, I brought, favorable mentioning in like New York Times, which says like the Chinaman, who incidentally came off quite convincingly enough to earn himself a television series, and so on and so on and so forth.
Can you remember the lines by Sterling Sullivan, the key lines?
He's one of my students.
Was he too?
Yes.
Okay. So many of them, famous persons of Hollywood that times was Bruce Lee students. Sullivan is also Bruce Lee students. Great thing.
But you read, there were some lines that express your philosophy. I don't know if you remember them or not.
Oh, I remember that. I said, this is what it is, okay?
You're talking to Longstreet, played by James Francesco.
I said, empty your mind.
Oh,
before.
What a quote. This quote is world famous. Bruce Lee's.
Shapeless, like water. Now you put
See
water
the expression.
into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. The water.
See the eyes. If you can see the eyes, you just through his eyes only he's speaking.
My friend, like that, you see?
Oh, I see. I get the idea. I get the power behind it.
Let's have a look. Let's have a look again.
I remember.
Again, one time.
This is what it is, okay?
You're talking to Longstreet, played by James Francesco.
Let's have a look.
Empty your mind.
Empty your mind.
Formless,
Shapeless.
Shapeless. like water.
Like water.
Now you put water into a cup,
It
it
becomes.
becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. The water, my friend.
Okay. Oh,
Like,
what a
I
statement.
see. I get
This,
the idea. I get the.
this proverb is world famous. World famous. And if you look at the Bruce Lee's life, yes, Bruce Lee was like an hot water only. Nobody can catch him. His body is so much flexible that he can 100% fitness, I can say. I can think that 100% fitness. Great.
The power behind it. So now, two things have happened. First, there's a pretty good chance that you'll get a TV series in the States called The Warriors, in which you use what, the martial arts
Well-
in a Western setting?
That was the original idea. Now,
Yeah.
Paramount, I did Longstreet
Paramount.
for Paramount, and Paramount wants me to be in a television series. On the other hand, Warner Brother wants me to be in another one, but both of them, I think, they want me to be in a modernized type of a thing. And they think that Western idea is out.
But
Whereas
you would
I
use,
want
you want to do the Western, eh?
I would, because you see, I mean, how else can you justify all these punching and kicking and violence except in the period of the West? I mean, in nowadays, I mean, you don't go around on the street kicking people or punching people, because if you do,
Really, Bruce Lee talk about India? Because in the subtitle you can see the India was being told. Really, Bruce Lee talking about India? Very good.
Yeah.
that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't care how good you are,
But this is true also of the Chinese dramas, which are mainly costume dramas. They're all full of blood and gore over here.
Oh, you mean here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, you see, I hope that the picture I am in would either explain why the violence was done, whether right or wrong or whatnot. But unfortunately, pictures, most of them here, are done mainly just for the sake of violence. You know what I mean? Like, fighting for 30 minutes, get stabbed for 50 minutes.
But I'm fascinated.
So Bruce Lee knows that whether it is right or wrong, just violence. Violence you need to see in the film. So Bruce Lee knows the tricky part of the Chinese film.
Your microphone back. I'm fascinated that you came back.
Microphone also fall
I am
down.
a martial artist.
You came back to Hong Kong on the verge of success in Hollywood and full of it, and suddenly, on the strength of one picture, you become a superstar. Everybody knows you.
Strength of one.
You have to change your phone number. You get mobbed in the streets. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to be able to live in both worlds? Are you going to be a superstar here, or one in the States, or both?
Well, let me say this. First of all,
Yes, Bruce Lee was become so much famous in that film that I think many of his enemies will grow up to go against him. So how Bruce Lee will deal in the real world? Will he go and fight in the real street, or just be polite and only do the fighting in the film section only? So how he will deal this type of two world? Great thing.
the word superstar really turned me off, and I'll tell you why. Because the word star, man, is an illusion. It's something what the public calls you. You should look upon oneself as an actor, man. I mean, you would be very pleased if somebody say, "Hey, man, you are a super actor." It is much better than superstar.
Yeah,
Therefore,
you've got to admit that you are a superstar. You're not the. If you're going to give me the truth.
I am now. I'm honestly saying this. Okay. Yes, I have been very successful.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, I think the word star is. I mean, I do not look upon myself as a star. I really don't. I mean, believe me, man,
Yeah.
when I say it. I mean, I'm not saying it because I.
What are you going to do? Let's get back to the question.
Okay.
Are you going to stay on?
So humble Bruce Lee that he didn't like the word superstar, because star is an illusion. Bruce Lee believes himself that he's just an actor. If people calls him, "Hey man, you are an actor," that's okay for Bruce Lee. But if somebody still you are a superstar, then Bruce Lee will be a little bit frustrated, right? Because he doesn't want this type of high level of words, superstar. Okay, just actor, okay for him. So so much simple thoughts Bruce Lee is having. Because if you become a superstar, you need to maintain that level of superstar. So I think Bruce Lee was a little bit frightened to maintain that superstar level in his future career. So rather he want to just stay with the word actor, simple actor. Great thing.
Hong Kong and be famous, or are you going to go to the United States and be famous, or are you going to try and eat your
Okay.
cake and have
This
it?
car.
I am going to do both because you see, I have already made up my mind that in the United States, I think something about the Oriental, the true Oriental should be shown.
Hollywood sure as heck hasn't.
You better believe it, man. I mean, it's always the pigtail and bouncing around, chop, with the eyes slant and all that. And I think that's very, very out of.
Is it true that you were the first job you had was being cast as Charlie Chan's number one?
Yeah, number one son. Yeah.
They never made a movie.
No. They were gonna make it into like a new Chinese James Bond type of a thing.
Oh, I
Now that the old man Chan is dead, Charlie is dead, and his son is carrying on.
But they didn't do that.
Batman came along, you see, because, and then everything was started to be going into that, that kind of
which you were in. But
by the way, I did a really terrible job in that, I have to say.
really, you didn't like yourself. I didn't see it. Let me ask you, however, about the problems that you face as a Chinese hero in an American series. Have people come up in the industry and said, well, we don't know how the audience are going to take a non-American?
Okay. So I think discriminatory. That if any American tells you, hey, you are a Chinese actor, so you don't know the American people. So let's see about what his reaction.
Such question has been raised. In fact, it is being discussed, and that is why the warrior is not going to be on.
I see.
You see, because unfortunately, such thing does exist in this world. You see, like I don't know, certain part of the country, right, where like they think that business-wise it's a risk, and I don't blame them. I mean, in the same way, it's like in Hong Kong, if a foreigner come and became a star, if I were the man with the money, I probably would have my own worry of whether or not the acceptance would be there. But that's all right, because
Bruce Lee was correct that if a foreigner comes to Hong Kong and become a superstar, then obviously in China also many people will question him, hey, you are not in Chinese, you are not in Hong Kongese. So that thing is also vice versa in American societies also. Many American people will ask, hey, you are not an American, you are a Chinese, or even an Asiatic, or even an Asiatic ethnic people. So this type of questions, Bruce Lee also faced, and Bruce Lee doesn't think that it is wrong, because it will happen in every part of the world, in every corner of the world, whether you're in America or China or India or whatever else. You will feel this type of questions. Some people ask you, hey, you are not this, you are that. What to do?
if you honestly express yourself, it doesn't matter.
Are you, how about the other side of the coin? Is it possible that you were...
I think Anchor is not going to listen all his full sentence of words, interacting. He wants to complete his sentence, and Anchor is just interacting. So, what to do?
You're fairly hip and fairly Americanized. Are you too Western for Oriental audiences?
Alliances.
How? I have been.
Yeah.
I have been criticized for that.
You have.
Oh,
I would think
definitely. Well, let me say this. When I do the Chinese film, I'll try my best not to be as American as I, have been adjusted to for the last 12 years in the States. But when I go back to the States, it seems to be the other way around.
You're too exotic, eh?
Yeah, man. I mean, they're trying to get me to do too many things that are really for the sake of being exotic. You understand what I'm trying to
Oh,
say?
sure.
So it's really, I mean, it's
When you live in both worlds, it brings us problems as well as advantages, and you've got both.
So I mean that Bruce Lee, yes, really he has to do some tough work. If he's in America, then he has to bring that American versions way of film. And if he's in China, then Chinese versions of film, Chinese characteristic type of humanity he need to bring in the film. So it's a hard because Bruce Lee's mixed of both the culture, China and America. Alliances.
Time to go to a commercial. I'll be back in a moment with Bruce Lee. Let me ask you whether the change in attitude on the part of the Nixon administration towards China has helped your chances of starring in an American TV series.
well, first of all, this happened before that.
Yeah.
But I do think that things of Chinese will be quite interesting for the next few years. I mean, not that I'm politically, inclining toward anything.
No, I understand that. But I just wondering.
But I mean, once the opening of China, I mean, that it will bring more understanding,
Yeah.
more things that are, hey, like different, and maybe in the contrast of comparison, some new thing might grow. So
Okay.
therefore, I mean, it's a very rich period to be in. I mean, like if I were born, let's say, 40 years ago,
Yeah.
if I have a thought in my mind, I said, boy, I'm going to star in a movie or star in a television series in America. Well, that might be a vague dream, but I think right now, maybe.
You still think of yourself?
So Bruce Lee think that yes, nicely that he is predicting that in the few years, after a few years, China will become famous in American society because he's bringing the Chinese culture in American society. So China, a new thing, a new inceptions will be come up in America. So he has a thought about this type of things, and indeed we have seen that many American fighters also has picked Chinese martial arts. If you look at the America also, there is many Chinese schools where American soldiers and American people used to get taught of these Chinese martial arts, uh, karate, judo, taekwondo. Then what is called Ip Man also used to fight. What is that fight is? Wang Chuk, or what is called that one? I'm forgetting that name. Really, there is also a great fight of Ip Man. Wing Chun. Wing Chun. If you look, Wing Chun is also another great form of fighting, and Bruce Lee's also have learned that about fighting.
Chinese, or do you ever think of yourself as North American?
You know what I want to think of myself? As a human being.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I don't want to sound like, as Confucius say, but under the sky, under the heaven, man, there is but one family. It just so happened, man, that people are different.
Okay, we got to go. Thank you, Bruce Lee, for coming
Hey,
here. Thank you for
Pierre.
watching.
Thank you.
So friends, what to think about the Bruce Lee's? I think it's very brilliant about the Bruce Lee's interview. Many deep insights you can get from the Bruce Lee's. He's thinking very much future progress of Chinese martial arts, Chinese films, and after this interview, also many of his films came out. The Enter of the Dragon, Game of Death, then Big Boss was past film of this interview. Then many of the film, the Chinese connections, what is called Enter of the Dragon, Return of the Dragon. So many of the films came out of Bruce Lee's, and unfortunately, Bruce Lee died in 1973 due to that what is called that brain attack. So he has a great deep insight of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's having a deep insight, and I loved his interview. I loved his voice. His voice is deep. His looking of eyes, that is also depth, and the philosophical statements. I mean, he's so much determined that he knows that what he's going to tell. He is very much aware that what he's going to tell to the anchor, to the people of the world. He's so much determined. He's not hesitating. He's determined. It's a great version of Bruce Lee's, and I've never seen this full interview of Bruce Lee. Some famous words, videos only I have seen of Bruce Lee's, but this is the full version of Bruce Lee's interview. I liked it, great thing, but unfortunately we didn't see Bruce Lee. We didn't get the Bruce Lee. If Bruce Lee still alive, then the world was very much get to know about Bruce Lee. The world can get a huge knowledge from the Bruce Lee, a great teacher. A great teacher this world can get. But I think that those who have seen Bruce Lee in real life, they are very much fortunate. Like many of the students of Bruce Lee's, they are very much fortunate that they have seen Bruce Lee in real life in front of their eyes, and they got experienced. And we only just have an experience in the movies only of Bruce Lee's, and this type of videos we can experience about Bruce Lee. I like the thing. I like the interviews of Bruce Lee. So friends, what do you think about the Bruce Lee? His statements, be water. That is also one of the famous quotes of Bruce Lee. So friends, how do you like this Bruce Lee's interview? Just comment me in these comment sections. Just comment me, and goodbye.